Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are going to be breaking down May production results from IREN, DMG, and Cipher. We've got a lot to go through in today's video. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you're holding any of these three companies and how you thought they performed in the month of May. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Well, here we go, guys. Thursday morning, how quickly the week has gone by. Anthony, Bitcoin hovering just below $105,000. The miners once again split, but the main event today, three more big production updates for the month of May.
Yeah, Bitcoin's round about where we started off 5 days ago. You can see the chart there. It shows we're in this band between 104, 107,000. So it's been, volatile in that space there. And we've got the daily chart just to show you how volatile on a daily basis is there. So even today, it's been as low as 104 and as high as 107 today. So again, using that band, it's used over the 5 days. But, great to see it continue being over 100,000. That's where we want it to be. We just want to wait for the next leg up.
Yeah, we certainly do. And as you say, almost a yo-yo screen there looking at the daily now. Bitcoin above the six-figure mark. That's boding very well for the miners. We have IREN up first on deck here. May production results. They were able to manage a record month of revenue in light of the Bitcoin price we're seeing right now, Anthony. So maybe we can start with them. Walk through the production results from really one of the other heavy hitters in the space. Earlier in the week, we had Marathon, CleanSpark, Riot all come out with their production results on the same day. Now we've got IREN, which is really the other piece of that tier one pie.
Yeah, this is one of the big hitters, IREN, and they announced recently 40 exahash was achieved. On this update, they're at 41 exahash, record monthly revenue 67 million, and great margins for that as well. I think 74%. In terms of revenues for most of the miners, that there'll be record revenues this month. We've already alluded to the fact that Marathon also had a record month in terms of their revenues. And I think it applies to most of the miners, even though the Bitcoin price, even though the Bitcoin production numbers are down compared to, say, the previous year, the Bitcoin price is significantly higher. So that's helped all these miners. And, 67 million for a month, that's, annualized, getting on for 750, 800 million. So it's a great position to be in. And that's just one part of the business. We know they're also trying to ramp up their Horizon 1 project, which is due to be completed in the fourth quarter of 2025. They already have HPC business, an on-demand service there, and that's been doing really well as well. So we'll go through some of the numbers from the update itself. Bitcoin mined 627. That's a big 8% increase from the previous month. We know there's an extra day. That's worth about 3% of that number there, but nice to see increased operational hash rate. If you look at operational hash rate, it went from 36.6 to 38.4. So, the expectation, if you think miners can operate at their total energized hash rate day on, day out, that's not going to happen in the space because, demand will require miners switch off. Some of these Texas miners are required to switch off, during the day many times. And for doing that, they do get some sort of benefits from demand response, services that they provide. So you can see quite clearly, even though they've got an installed hash rate of 41, and arguably if that was added during the month, it could be an average of about 40.5. So they're operating about 2 exahash lower than their full energized hash rate. But you can see the increase in operational hash rate in the month was 5%. We've talked about that one day at 3%. There's the 8% in terms of Bitcoin mining. So tends to be operating in terms of utilization at a very similar utilization than they were the previous month, which is good to see. In terms of current operating power, 660 megawatts. Fleet efficiency 15, and only really CleanSpark is really close to that, and they're at 16.71. In terms of revenue per Bitcoin, they achieved during May, this is where it gets really interesting, 103,345. That's a 19% increase on April. And bear in mind, when you consider the Bitcoin price at the end of May was 104,000, at the end of April was 94,000. That's where you get that uplift in terms of revenue there. That's a 90% increase. That's really helped get towards that 67 million. Power cost per Bitcoin. IREN, one of the few miners that actually put this out there. Yes, the power cost increased slightly. They are using market rate, so the power will change on a month-by-month basis. It all depends on what they're prepared to mine at. And if you think about the mining margin, that's the total revenue less the electricity. So if you're achieving 74%, and yes, the power cost went up 11% month on month, you're still achieving 74%, which was a higher percentage than the previous. That's because the revenues are so much higher. So don't forget the energy cost increased from 24,000, so 11% of that, but the actual revenue increased from 19% from a total of 86,000. So you're looking at a significant amount of revenue increase compared to cost increase. In terms of AI services, they're constantly increasing there. It was 1.6 million for March. It was 2 million for the month of April. Now in May, 2.2 million, 98% hardware profit margin. Now, bear in mind, that doesn't include the cost of the GPUs or the cost of building the facilities. That will go through as depreciation, but showing good increases in that revenue stream. And all we're waiting for now is some sort of an update to say Horizon One has now got a co-location partner, and that we're off to the races really with IREN. I mean, everything else they're doing is perfect. That's the only missing part of the jigsaw puzzle. Once they get a client in Horizon, it won't be long then before Sweetwater 1 and 2 start getting, more and more looked at in terms of what's available there. And we're looking at 2 gigawatts there. So massive amounts of power for IREN, one of the biggest mining companies that has power available to them. It's not a pipeline of power. This is actually power on land and facilities that they're actually got in place. So another sensational update from IREN this month.
Yeah, no kidding. Strength to strength is the term we've used with IREN. We had a great discussion with them. Got to meet Will, the other co-CEO, down in Las Vegas as well. So, Anthony, you're the resident expert here, the analyst. I'm going to put you on the hot seat. I've got some questions about IREN. Number one, we've got their slide deck here showing 50 exahash by the end of June. You just mentioned they're at 41. By my math, that's 9 exahash in a single month. Correct me if I'm wrong. That seems like a big bite to take for any company in a 25-day span.
It is, but this is IREN we're talking about, and IREN have delivered all the way up through 2024 and now 2025 in terms of achieving every target on the way up there. They haven't shied away from putting June the 30th to achieve 50 exahash. I'm expecting, to be honest with you, maybe even tomorrow or maybe even Monday or Tuesday next week, another update in terms of hash rate increase to show that they're getting closer, maybe 45. And then by the end of the month, they'll have installed those additional miners that are coming from Southeast Asia into that facility. But, with only effectively 25 more days to go, and they're still putting on track to achieve it by the end of the month, they'd be foolish to not get to that target by the end of the month. The market looks, doesn't look really favourable. We saw with Bitfarms, they were literally saying to the month before their target date that they were due to, still on track to achieve it, and then they had to sort of recant that and basically saying we're not going to get to that figure, and actually now we're not going to get to that figure next year. So. And now they're not doing Bitcoin mining in terms of growth. They're going to maintain what they've currently got. So IREN, I think, have got a few more cards to play. They'll use another update in the next few days to highlight where that 41's increased to. It is a big number, 9 exahash. I mean, you look at companies that with about 9 exahash. I mean, Hive have only just reached 10 exahash, and they're the oldest miner out there. They've been going for over 8 years. It's a significant amount of hash rate to increase, but we know it's on one site, so it's not a case of they're updating 4 or 5 other big sites. And they'd have to be big sites to take, 1, 2, 3 exahash anyway. This is 9 exahash going into one site. So for me, I think the buildings are pretty much ready. I think it's just a case now of the machines getting delivered. put into the buildings and effectively getting energized. Now you won't get to see an operational hash rate of 50 by the end of the month. I'm assuming that'll get closer maybe towards 40 exahash, but I think they'll achieve the 50 by the end of the month, and we'll probably see at least one more update during June just to highlight that increase before we get the end of the month increase.
All right, so there's the expert prediction, you guys. As Dan said on our podcast, just a matter of plugging them in. Unfortunately, there's about tens of thousands of these little things to plug in these ASICs. So, second question for you, Anthony, in the hot seat. They put together a nice little annualized illustrative adjusted EBITDA table here, a sensitivity table looking at different Bitcoin prices. You can see they've highlighted right now that $105,000 mark, which is actually above the 103 average you just referenced for May. So that's looking really good as well. Can you talk to us about this table and the impact these moves in Bitcoin price have on the companies, their margins, and eventually profitability?
Yeah, and so this is, as you quite rightly say, this is a sensitivity analysis. This looks at, the price of Bitcoin and how that will affect revenues. Now, with costs generally, most of your costs are going to remain, normal. They're going to be able to be controlled, so they'll be fairly static. You're going to pay people pretty much the same every month there. You'll have budgets for things like marketing, legal, professional fees, etc., etc. G&A costs, you can control those. Energy costs is something that you can't control, not when you're using market rate. But what IREN have done here in this illustration is they're basically saying if we're about to achieve the same amount of Bitcoin every month and we're going to get the same price approximately a month, and bear in mind we're only looking at a few percentages month on month. They're one of the lowest power costs, certainly in the last sort of 18 months of all the miners. They've even put down, they've been clever here, they've put down that if the price of Bitcoin is 35,000, that means they're effectively breaking even. And that's a little message to the rest of the miners out there that they can do this at that point there. Now, I don't think some of the overheads are including that. I don't think depreciation and stock compensation are included in that figure. Someone can quote me wrong on that, but that would, at 35,000, if you look at what they had in the previous quarter in terms of margin, including all the costs, it wasn't anywhere near that amount. That amount of cost for the miners. But if you remember, IREN are at 40 exahash at the moment, and so if you look at their previous earnings, they were growing to 40 exahash. So the revenues reflected a number between, say, 30 and 40 exahashes in terms of average revenue based on exahash. Once they get to 50 exahash, your revenues then, will be determined by Bitcoin price. Your costs should stay pretty much static, and that's why the table shows all the levels of costs, no matter what the Bitcoin price is, at the same level. Now, even at today's price, and they've even got 105,000, it's probably Bitcoin's at 105,000 approximately today, just maybe $100 short of that. It shows that the EBITDA at today's price could be somewhere in the region of $651 million. That's an enormous amount. I mean, no miner's achieving anything like that in their earnings figures. I mean, we've talked about earnings for miners. If you look at the last sort of 8 quarters, I think you're lucky if one miner's actually achieved 3 green quarters, 3 profitable quarters of those 8. So it is a real challenge. But we have seen the Bitcoin price really start to move from that beginning of 2024 when it was 42,000 to where it is today, all-time high, 112,000 already achieved. Who knows where it gets to during the remaining of the bull cycle of 2025? And do we go back in 2026 like previous cycles and go back into a bear cycle? Who knows? We've had so much positive news, adoption, etc. ETFs. The fact that Strategy have increased their total now to getting close to 600,000, which is effectively nearly 3% of the whole amount of Bitcoin that's out there. But then if you look at the table and from 105,000 go to say 150,000, which is not unreasonable. I mean, bear in mind we were at New York in February when some of the major investment banks and CEOs like Cathie Wood and Van Eck were quoting 180, quoting 250,000. Well, 250,000 isn't on that chart, so let's use 150 or even 200,000. You're getting close to $1 billion of EBITDA. at 150. And if it goes to 200,000, you're 1.3 billion EBITDA. And that's just on the Bitcoin mining. Bear in mind, IREN are trying to focus all the rest of their power on HPC because they believe that's the better model at the moment. So I think the future is really, really good for IREN. They've done the right thing in terms of mining, low cost, the best efficiency of all the miners. That's the two things you've got to achieve. Most of their mining's on one site, so you're keeping overheads and costs down to one site. If you've got 30 sites, that means you've got managers at every site managing those sites. You've got economies of scale by having, big, large sites where you still have to have, management levels, but you don't have to have the level of managers that you would have if you're dispersed over 30 sites. And some miners have got 15, 16, 17 sites. IREN aren't in that position. They've literally got like 4 sites at the moment. And when Sweetwater 1 and 2 comes on, that takes it to 6 sites. So it's not many sites. So they can really save on sort of like management costs. And maybe some efficiency in terms of staffing costs.
Well, and also think about the logistics, Anthony, the repair services on site, all
On
of the
site.
transportation costs, security costs, heating, cooling. There's obviously a ton of economies of scale here. Now, you made reference, well, a couple things you made reference to. Number one, these numbers are starting to look mind-boggling. Just on the Bitcoin mining side, we start talking about multiple or valuation multiples, maybe a 2 EBITDA on the Bitcoin mining side. But as you alluded to, IREN is moving into HPC AI where we could see 20, 25, 30. Just look at Applied Digital this week, CoreWeave, some of these companies in that sector. So that's my final and third question for you, Anthony. You made reference to Horizon 1. This is the liquid cooled, really state-of-the-art facility, I guess, crown jewel of the IREN portfolio. Dan made it sound like they would have a client by Q4 in our most recent interview. That lines up exactly with what you can see on this slide from their most recent investor deck, talking about Q4 energization. Can you talk to us about this transition, where IREN is going with this Horizon 1 project? And again, do you think they will fill that space by year end?
Yeah, I think what they're doing there is unlike what other miners are doing at the moment that are that have contracts as well. So this liquid cooling will be an advanced technology what others are providing currently. We've been told liquid cooling is the way forward for data centers in terms of the fact that it's less maintenance required. Obviously, again with noise and things like that, you don't have to locate too far away from domestic residences, and so you could be more close to aligned to city centres. But this is a great opportunity in terms of size. You're effectively saying this is along the lines of with what TeraWulf in terms of size, what they're offering at Lake Mariner for the Core 42. We spoke extensively yesterday about the 4 miners that have got deals at the moment and who's likely to be the next. Well, I wouldn't write off IREN and Cipher from announcing soon. And Hut 8, who's already on the list of data center providers. Somebody knows somebody there who put that list together. So obviously they've got to announce something. I mean, the rabbit was out of the hat effectively about 6 months ago when the mayor of the local area decided to announce that Hut were moving in there with one of the hyperscalers. So although they've not confirmed that, the expectation is they probably will make an announcement soon. So a lot of these miners, moving closer and closer to getting deals. And if Dan, expects that to happen in Q4, he's the one that's having conversations, with his management team, with these potential clients. He knows how the land lies. They've been doing this now for probably the last, 6 to 9 months. This isn't something that's just happened, in the last few weeks. These things have been going on for a while, and he'll know how the land lies. I mean, as soon as that deal from Core Scientific came out, which was June the 4th last year, so we're at the anniversary of that deal had been announced. And remember, on the morning of that deal, CoreWeave tried to buy Core Scientific for $1 billion, and Adam and the team there said no, thank you. We think we're worth a bit more than that. And as luck would have it, they've shown how they've grown immensely. Now they're getting close to 4 billion in terms of market capitalization. So IREN in the same, looking in the same boat. They want to have some of that co-location hosting with a client. They've got a great facility there at Childress to showcase what they can do with maybe 70 megawatts. And then they've got, a further 2 gigawatts down the road, 2 hours away at Sweetwater 1 and 2. Which at the moment there's not too much being prepared there, but there are obviously all the power conduits have been ordered and they're starting to build some of the initial buildings there. And we saw some photographs taken from some of the social media guys who actually made a visit to Childress and Sweetwater the day before the conference started. So they made an effort to go all the way out there, make that journey, and it's a fair journey. I think we had a chance to go maybe a year ago when we were in Dallas, and it was I think 4.5 hour journey from Dallas just to get to Childress, and Sweetwater's a further 2 hours away. So you're going to plan those days, you need to plan a full day with an early start, because it's no mean feat. But the photographs came back, and you can start seeing what they're doing there. We've also seen some aerial footage as well, and we know from IREN, as we've seen the Childress site develop, those sites will develop fairly quickly, and they're talking 2027, 2028 when they're hoping to get those energized. So Childress will be the great opportunity to showcase Horizon 1.
Yeah, it certainly will. And obviously, all of this is in support of that growing, I guess, gap we're seeing in the future demand expectations for gigawatts allocated to HPC AI and basically the current run rate as to where we're looking in the United States. Yeah, and just a final point on IREN, Anthony, to the astute eye, you'll notice the schematic drawings of the Childress location have changed slightly in April's renditioning versus May, with Horizon 1 now being shifted more to the left, not again aligned with that Phase 5 data center construction.
Yeah, they've moved it to, yeah, they've moved it across now. So if that's an accurate drawing, then moved it separate away from the 5 phases now, and it's on its own. It's still using primary substation 6, but yeah, as I say, we look forward to seeing that more news getting a client in there in the near future.
Most definitely. And you can see on Twitter again, by Sam could have something to do with a potential client. So time will tell there. But again, a good observation here if you're paying attention in those documents or images provided by the company. So with that being said, Anthony, you made reference to Cipher as well. We're going to come on to them in a second. But before we do, DMG Blockchain, they came out with their May production results as well. We were able to run into Sheldon and Steven down in Las Vegas. The team's very optimistic about the systemic trust, starting to onboard customers, revenue opportunities in sight for that initiative, and also starting to see some improved results from the fleet upgrade initiatives they've been doing in Christina Lake as well.
Yeah, and they've reached that initial target 2.1 exahash. Their average operational hash rate was slightly less in May than it was in April, 1.89 compared to 1.93. But actually, DMG did say that they will be turning down some machines over the next few months. And sometimes when you turn the machine down, you do get sort of like better profitability in terms of you can actually raise the efficiency of the miner by not overclocking it. And the reason for that is they have the Bitmain T21. So, at rising temperatures, they want to make sure that they're not going to overheat these machines. So they're not going to put full power through them over the next few months. And so that's why you see that small decline in the hash rate. In terms of Bitcoin balance, 350 Bitcoin as opposed to 351 the previous month. That's a reduction of just one there. So they sold 32 Bitcoin. In terms of, Bitcoin mined per day, obviously it doesn't take a calculator to work out that they're mining approximately 1 Bitcoin every day, and that was through April and May. In terms of Bitcoin per exahash, this is interesting because they're achieving 16.4, and there's about 5 miners on 16.3. So unless we get an update from, I think, 2 or 3 of the last miners to release, I think Bitdeer, Soluna, and Hive might come out with a good number, but it looks like DMG is certainly going to be top 3 for the month there, and that's they've been a sort of like a top 5, top 6 miner in terms of operational production by exahash over the last sort of 18 months. So it should come as no shock that they can have an outstanding month, and it looks like they have done there. In terms of the HODL value, even though they've got less HODL, albeit only by 1 Bitcoin, you can see the HODL value increase to 36.6 million compared to 33.1 million for the month of April. That's 11% increase more there. And in terms of HODL value to market capitalization, that's come down slightly. It's 88% at the moment versus 94%. Now we know when the share price had dropped, I mean, that was over 100%. So there's obviously we've seen a lot of miners in the last month actually increase share prices. Year to date, most miners are still in the red because we talked, extensively a couple of podcasts ago about, that November, December when they hit sort of 52-week highs and we saw a real big pullback and a massive pullback. Even though the Bitcoin price reached its all-time high in January, the mining stocks were really deflated in that sort of early part of the year, and they're just starting to that road to recovery now. They've still got a long way. I think some of the miners have still got 20-30%. If you look at 52-week highs for some of them, some of them got, over 100% to go to get to 52-week highs. So, it's still a challenge, to get back to those numbers there. So that's why you can see a little bit of improvement during May in terms of that market cap reflecting, 88%, for the HODL as opposed to the previous one, 94. And I think in March it was probably over 100%. So you can see it's going in the right direction there. But again, the market's not giving the likes of DMG, the likes of Mara, any real credit for the HODL there. They've got, 2.1 exahash. They've got, a great facility, 65 megawatts. DMG do far more than Bitcoin mining, got their own mining pool. They created the Mara mining pool, which has been very successful for Mara. They've also got, like you say, systemic trust. They've also got the softwares that they do. I don't think too many people give them enough credit for that. Certainly the market's not giving many credit at the moment. Time will tell as we see this sort of this rise that we see in the stock price and other share prices that have been going the same direction for the next few months as Bitcoin price continues to stay in this band of 104 to 107.
Yeah, most definitely. The Blocksteer technology, the software platform, they've also got that agreement with the Malahat Indigenous or First Nations group here in Canada. So some great catalysts on the horizon, especially on the HPC AI front as well. So with that being said, Anthony, Cipher Mining, this is a big one for a number of reasons, most notably Black Pearl on pace to energize this month. We can see in the press release, first sentence of the press release. In addition to that, some great information from May production results as well. But we talk about companies that have been gearing up over the past year, 18 months, 24 months for this push into the large-scale data center infrastructure space. Cipher Mining, that dream is about to come true in the month of June here.
Yeah, and great when that switches on there. It's going to be just a couple of exahash to start with, but ramping up by the end of Q3, I think an additional 9.5 exahash. Now they're at 13.5 at the moment. That'll take them up to 22 exahash. That's certainly up there ahead of Bitfarms, and certainly where hopefully Hive want to be by the end of the year when their target of 25 is reached. In terms of May production, pretty much another decent month for Cipher. They don't give their operational hash rate, which is a shame really, because when you're using the energized hash rate, and we know these miners are curtailing, we can see straight away from Cipher's update they're curtailing because they've made some power sales of 4 Bitcoin. So in terms of Bitcoin mined, they mined 175. That's a 2% increase on the previous month. And if you think about the 3%, they're there and thereabouts what they did in April. Power sales were 4 instead of 3 for April, so again, a little bit of an increase there. Average operational hash rate, well, that's 13.5. They're probably operating closer to maybe 11 in terms of wire production. Operational power at 371. Mining fleet under 20, and you want to see it under 20 for miners now. We've got one at 15 there, so if you're operating, way over 20, it means your energy costs are higher, irrespective of what your energy price is, because you're using more power to mine a Bitcoin. They sold less Bitcoin in the month of May, only 66. So that means they've now got a hodl of 966. So they've increased that by 13%. That's got a value of 101 million as at the end of May. And if you compare that to what they had at the end of April, it was about 20 million less, 80.5 million. And if you look at their hodl to market capitalization, it's down at 6.8%. But again, it's because the mining stocks have had a little bump in price over this last sort of 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, exciting times at Cipher, Anthony. Looking forward to seeing that Black Pearl site continue to progress throughout the month here. Now, to round things out, we've got the forward hash price curve. Interesting observation. I think this is the first time we've actually seen the projected rate increase. We'll talk about maybe some reasons as to why that is in terms of difficulty adjustment next up. But interesting to see, Anthony, starting to get closer to that $54, 54 and change range, and still out until November, well above 50 now.
Yeah, and not too many days ago, it was $56 per petahash per day. So, not unreasonable why it can't get back to 54, especially the Bitcoin price holding in this range. And that's probably why you're seeing this, increased trajectory now from what we've seen previously. Heading to 54 sort of by, mid to the end of July, and then slowly coming down there. Because at the end of the day, they haven't got as much. You need to have, a lot of data to make some assumptions. Nobody knows what the Bitcoin price is going to be tomorrow. You have to make some estimations, looking at the deviation of the Bitcoin price on a daily basis to see if you can come up with some, assumptions as to where you think it will be in the next month, 6 months, next year. But believe you me, we've had many Bitcoin miners on the podcast who've tried to come up with their expectation where the hash rate figure is going to be for the end of the year. They were literally lost after about 2 months. So it's quite challenging. We're in a challenging space where we just don't know what's going to happen. We all hope Bitcoin price gets to wherever it gets to. If Van Eck at 180,000, Cathie Woods at 250,000, even though the numbers are great, but we just don't know.
Yeah, it certainly is essentially selling insurance on future hash rate with a lot of unknown variables. And if you relate this to traditional mining, Anthony, think of gold mining, a very similar kind of dynamics. If the price of gold goes up, obviously more people try to find gold, and that makes gold harder to find. So similar dynamics, but in a digital, I guess, relationship here. So speaking of difficulty, you had mentioned we generally see that go up. We're expecting a difficulty reduction here on the 14th of June. So that obviously bodes very well for the miners. We talked about record revenues with Bitcoin price. Obviously, if difficulty can drop as well, that's a double dip for the miners.
Yeah, and to highlight why it's going to drop at the moment, and I say at the moment because things can change really quickly in this space. It's taking 10 minutes and 23 seconds to mine a block at the moment. It should be taking 10 minutes, which means the miners are finding it a little bit more difficult than they normally do. We've seen in the last, few months where miners are only taking 9 minutes to mine a block, and then the difficulty has to be, made more challenging for miners, and therefore it goes up. But in this instance, at the moment, they're finding it a little bit more difficult. As I say, there's still 9 days to go, so I wouldn't count all your chickens before, the 14th of June when the difficulty changes next, because it could go either way. And as you get closer to that date, more and more volatility occurs as well. If you look at the global hash rate, the 7-day moving average, it's still over 900. It was over 1,000 exahash, in recent weeks. So it's come down a little bit, and that's probably why we're seeing this increase in time to mine. If you've got less miners actually searching for that algorithm, that number for the block rewards, it's going to take them a little bit longer to do that. As the hash rate increases, obviously the time to mine comes down, and therefore you have the reverse effect. But at the moment, it's positive for the miners, but things can change in 9 days.
Yeah, they certainly can. Speaking about counting chickens before the eggs hatch here, Anthony, Miner Madness not looking so rosy for us anymore. We were shaping up to have a strong finish at the start of the competition. We're now in the third month. We're actually scaling up for Miner Madness 4.0, which will be coming out in early July there. But you and I, at least in terms of the analyst board, not looking as best as we did a few months ago.
No, it's come down. I think we were leading at one point, and now we're sort of like in the bottom three. But that's not a problem. I'm happy the way the competition's gone. Everyone's in profitable territory at the moment. And if you'd have said to anybody after 2 months and a few days that you had a chance of investing in three stocks and you're up over 31%, I'd have took the 31% to that point in time, no doubt about it. But if you look at Agrippa at the top there, with his chosen three miners, IREN, Core Scientific, Cipher, All those three looking to go into the HPC space. We talked about this yesterday. We did a big podcast on that there. If you haven't seen that podcast, go in there and have a look. It does a little bit of a comparison analysis between the four companies that have landed the co-location contracts with the likes of CoreWeave and Core42. Really interesting podcast to watch there. You can see why some of these miners have increased prices in recent times. I mean, look at the CoreWeave IPO. I mean, that company was up massively, in the last few months, and it's delivering as well. So, it delivered over $1 billion in revenue in its first quarter, due to deliver 5 billion. The knock-on effect from that is the mining companies that are now contracted with the likes of CoreWeave will also start seeing some of that revenues coming through to them as well. So this is going to be a great period of time for those miners who are pivoting across to HPC. Who knows how long it lasts, but, some of those contracts are 10, 12, 15 years long with options to increase that to, in excess of 20 years. So it's not a sort of like something that they're taking up for a few weeks. This is a long-term investment, long-term partnership, and long-term good margins, predictable margins, which the market likes to see. And that's probably why some of these share prices have had a little bit of a hike in the last few weeks on the back of the likes of CoreWeave, and that recent contract with Applied Digital that we talked about in detail yesterday. So great to see some of the stocks doing well there. If you look at the main leaderboard, which we're not showing on here, Gryphon Mining, with that share price at the moment, the three leads on the main board are the ones that have got Gryphon in their three picks. Good news on that there, but a good competition overall. We're starting to get ready now for Miner Madness 4, which will take place from early July. So start thinking now ahead. Now, what do you think is going to happen in July, August, September, the next 3 months now? Start doing a bit of research into your picks, and we'll start putting out the entry information in the next couple of weeks or so. So we'll get ready to start that immediately after this one ends at the end of the month.
Yeah, we certainly will. Looking forward to that one, Anthony. And as you say, still happy with the return, and more happy that everyone in the competition is having a positive return this time around. So with that being said, you guys, let us know what you thought of today's production result analysis. If you're holding any of these three miners and your top pick in the space right now, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.